Middle school was the worst. It looked like I had a mountain range of pimples on my face, and I couldn't get through a single sentence without my voice without my voice cracking within the middle of a sentence. Now, in order to try and overcome these obstacles that I faced during middle school, I tried to gain more social popularity with my peers by running for some of our school's office positions. I decided that if I were elected president, or if I were elected perhaps treasurer, it might help me to win appeal with my friends. And I devised a sneaky little plan. If I ran for 2 different office positions, I would have twice the chance of getting elected, and thus twice the chance of becoming popular. So when I talked to our ASB advisor about my plan, she said that I wasn't allowed to do this, because you can't run for 2 forms of office. So then I was left trying to decide if I wanted to be president or treasurer, and I couldn't make up my mind, so I just decided not to run. The media is covering a similar situation, with politician Beto O'Rourke coming out of Texas. Now, we see that Beto O'Rourke, according to an article published by Politico on February 18th of this year, only narrowly lost to Ted Cruz in the state of Texas, which in of itself was a historic feat. Losing by roughly only 9% in a state that's been historically solid red, almost turning this state purple, was a very big accomplishment. So after this accomplishment, many people have been calling for Beto 2020, or for Beto instead to run for election in the Senate. So many people are saying he should do one, and others are saying he should do the other, which is why we must ask today's question. Should Beto O'Rourke forego a presidential bid to challenge John Cornyn in 2020? And I believe that the answer is actually no. And we can understand this through 3 main points. The first is that Beto can actually legally run for both. And then after understanding the legal statutes that allow him to run for both, we will understand how Beto actually has a decent chance at winning the Democratic nomination. And finally, even if Beto doesn't win the Democratic nomination, at least attempting it wouldn't hurt his chances in running for Senate. So first, let's go back to the Lyndon B. Johnson era. What we can see here is, according to an article published by the Texas Law Review on December 15th of 2016, we can see that there is a statute in section 141.003 of Texas's legal code. It is also known as the Lyndon B. Johnson Law. And it was created back when Lyndon B. Johnson was trying to rerun for Senate while also running for the presidency. And what this law stated is that you can run for 2 different elected official positions as long as one of those is either president or vice president. Now, this law has not been changed and is still clearly in effect today in Texas. Although it is not well known about, it is something that Beto O'Rourke has actually discussed as a potential avenue for running for both offices. So we can see that Beto has a clear legal opportunity to decide if he wanted to, he could run for both the presidency in 2020 and he could run, and then if that didn't work out, he could challenge John Cornyn for the Senate position. So when we're looking at today's extemp question, we don't need to look at it as which should he do, we should rather look at it as would it be a smart political move for him to run for president if he's also considering running for Senate. And this can be addressed through my next main point, which is that Beto O'Rourke actually has a decent chance at the election, or at least at the Democratic presidential bid in 2020. So first, we can look to an article published by the New York Times on March 3rd of this year. And what it tells us is that Beto O'Rourke has an interesting sort of appeal that many voters think is the one thing that could get him the Democratic nomination. And this has been colloquially dubbed as, quote, white wokeness. Now, white wokeness and what Beto O'Rourke is described as, it is someone who can appeal to the minority voters while also not turning off the more white and moderate voters. What the New York Times article found is that Beto O'Rourke, compared to many other candidates, actually has some of the strongest appeal among minority voters, and specifically a much higher appeal amongst Latino voters. They write that the reasoning behind this is that Beto has very progressive policies that appeal to these different minority groups. But also Beto O'Rourke does this without turning off the more right-leaning Democrats and the more left-leaning Republicans, or the moderate base. The reasoning behind this, although it's a sad political reality, is the state of the country we live in. And that is that an article published by the Brookings Institute, which analyzed trends in American politics from the years of 2003 to 2017, found that when we look at politics, we can see that if a white politician says that they want to stand with minorities, they will receive less backlash from moderates than if a non-white politician does the same thing. So if we go back to the term of white wokeness, this is just one of many reasons why many political analysts believe that Beto actually has a good chance at winning the Democratic nomination. It's because he combines one of the main values of the current Democratic Party, which is trying to appeal to everyone and trying to promote equality, while also not disenfranchising voters that may lie in the middle. And this is interesting because Beto is one of the only candidates that could do this. Take candidates such as Bernie Sanders, who do appeal very much to different groups. However, even though Bernie Sanders technically is white, we see that his appeal among moderates isn't very high. Whereas if we take other candidates, such as Cory Booker, although he is believed to be quite moderate, we still see that many white voters don't agree with him and believe that he is too progressive. Although there are still many candidates that are running for the Democratic nomination. So Beto O'Rourke might not get it, but we see that he actually has a convincing chance. But let's talk about the situation in which Beto doesn't get it. We have already reviewed the legal statute that would allow him to continue running and to challenge John Cornyn. So why would this be better if he also decided to run for president? This can be seen in an article published by the Los Angeles Times on March 12th of this year, which tells us that one of the best indicators of how many people know about a candidate is whether or not they've been seen on TV. Think about it this way. When you watch presidential debates, you're getting some of the most info that many Americans don't get because they get to watch and hear the different opinions of a candidate. Although a lot of people like to be very informed on different politicians, many American citizens, the only exposure they get to candidates is through these political debates. So if Beto were to run for president, it would mean that he would be televised and that people all around the world would get to see him. But specifically, people in Texas would recognize him not only as a candidate that could be good for Senate in their state, but as a presidential candidate for the whole country. So we see that the media attention that Beto would get would serve him well if he decided to run for Senate, even if he lost the previous election for president. The other reason behind this is because Beto O'Rourke actually has a very good funding base. We see that when he decided to challenge Ted Cruz, The Economist reported just weeks after that election ended that Beto had a much larger funding base than Ted Cruz, which was quite significant because Ted Cruz was known for being a big funder. So if Beto O'Rourke were to do the same thing and to run for president, it would again mean getting a lot of funding, much of which could be transferred over to running against John Cornyn for the Senate race. In conclusion, we can see that Beto O'Rourke has an interesting choice, one which I did not have in middle school, which is that he can simply choose to run for both offices. And in my second point, we analyzed how he might have a decent shot at the Democratic nomination. And we see that finally, even if he doesn't get this nomination, it would still make sense for him to at least shoot for the moon, because maybe he'll land somewhere in outer space. Or maybe he will end up getting that nomination, because it will increase his media attention, which will make him a more productive candidate when he runs against John Cornyn.